In this video, I think about resurrecting an old Games Workshop skirmish game, Shadow War Armageddon. One of the best things about this hobby, tabletop wargaming, is that games can never truly die. In the world of video games, if a title requires like a dedicated server or some kind of thing like that to run the game, well, if the server gets shut down by the game company, then that's usually it. No more game. Now, I know before you write into the comments, I've heard about, custom servers run by enthusiasts on certain games to keep dead titles alive sometimes, but generally, if it's a multiplayer game that needs a special server to either match players for multiplayer or to run persistent world states and all that kind of stuff, and if the company shuts it down, dead game. On the other hand, look at Mordheim. Mordheim is a 1990s fantasy skirmish game from Games Workshop that hasn't had any new official content published in around 20 years or so. Yet, there was just a recent Mordheim event held a few weeks ago in New England, called, strangely enough, the New England Mordheim Open, or NEMO, that had something like 60 tables of players, which means around 120 players, because it's 2 players per table, of course. This is massive for what would be called, like a dead game, and it just goes to show you that as long as even a few players are still interested, a tabletop wargame is never truly dead. That said, there are some uphill battles to fight with getting certain tabletop wargames back onto the table, right? Like sometimes it's because the game's not dead, but the older version that you prefer isn't actually the current version, right? Like case in point, I loved Kill Team 2018, and I didn't really care for Kill Team 2021 nor Kill Team 2024. I certainly could play the old version still. I have like the books and all that, but getting other players can be hard when there's newer versions of the same game, and then there's confusion about which version you're interested in and playing and all that kind of stuff. When looking for Mordheim players, because it hasn't been updated in 20 years, you're generally all on the same page. Games Workshop came out with a game in April of 2017 that they supported for maybe 6 months, maybe not quite. Shadow War Armageddon is what it was called. It was a big, chunky box with a group of Space Marine scouts versus some orcs. It had some terrain, and it had some tokens and dice, and it was back then when GW used to still use like a lot of those kind of plastic templates for stuff, like for flame attack weapons and blast weapons, stuff like that. So those were in there as well. Rules-wise, it was pretty much just based off of the old Necroanda 2nd edition rules. It was nearly identical. Necroanda hadn't been supported in itself in years and years at this point, much like Mordheim. So a lot of folks just pretty much thought that this new game was the successor to Necroanda. Then, in August of 2017, 4 months after the release of Shadow War Armageddon, Games Workshop announced a new version of Necroanda called Necroanda Underhive. Now, why they re-released Necroanda 4 months after releasing what seemed like its successor, no one really knows. I mean, if they were going to release Necroanda later in the year, like then why bother releasing Shadow War Armageddon earlier part of the year or at all, right? Like some folks online say that it was just to move more terrain, to sell more terrain, or they had an extra bunch of terrain they had to get rid of. I don't know. Others posit that it was like weird internal politics between the different design studios at Games Workshop, but really, who knows? I just really enjoyed Shadow War Armageddon personally. I loved that I could use a lot of like regular Warhammer 40K models that I already had. I liked the kind of older style rule system, because remember, at this point, 8th edition of Warhammer 40K came out like a few months later after, Shadow Wars Armageddon, and it was it was considerably streamlined, which some folks liked, and then, some other folks didn't so much. And don't get me wrong, new Necroanda is great, the models, the terrain kits, and all that kind of stuff, but the rules are really, really, really dense, more than I personally like. Also, you have to buy a whole bunch of books to play properly. Shadow War Armageddon hit a sweet spot for me, and it's just the one book. And then it pretty much disappeared, even though it was popular enough that, after the initial box splash release, right, and selling out of stock and you couldn't get it anywhere anymore, they followed up with a book-only release for people who wanted the rules so that they could play even though they weren't able to get the launch box anymore with the models and the terrain and all the whatnot, right? This thicker book, you can spot the standalone book if you go looking at it on eBay because it has this cut line down here on the bottom, Deadly Skirmish Combat in a War-Torn Hive World on the bottom of the cover. And if it doesn't have that, then it's the book that came in the box instead. The difference between the thicker and the thinner book, and you can definitely see here which one's thicker and which one's thinner, is the listing of the forces, right? The thin book that came in the box, it has information in it for Space Marine Scouts, Astra Militarum veterans, Imperial Guard, and then, of course, Orc Boys. The thicker standalone book includes all three of those, but also then includes, let's see here, Sisters of Battle, there we go, and then also, I think, Chaos Space Marines, and then also Dark Eldar, what do they call them? Dark Eldar Witch Cult Teams, and then there's also not Gene Stealers yet, we still got regular Eldar, Craft World Eldar, Normal Eldar, anyway, and then of course there's also Gene Stealer Cults, hybrids, and then also there's Grey Knights, I think, yep, Grey Knight Special Operatives, Grey Knight Kill Teams, and then there's also Harlequin Troops, and there's also Inquisition, which I'm super looking forward to, again, and then there's also Necrons, which I'm also super looking forward to, and then Skitarii, I already have a whole bunch of them ready to go for my old kill team from back in 2020 or 2018. And then there's Tau Pathfinders, which I'm not frankly myself real super interested in, but whatever. And then lastly, there's Tyranid Warriors. All this stuff comes in the big box, but if you can only find the skinny version of the book, that is the one that doesn't have the cut line and all that kind of stuff, and also doesn't have all that stuff in it, there were some PDF downloads out there that were available that I've been told about, and so I don't know where to find them, so don't ask me, but they should be out there on the internet somewhere. As this game was the year before my beloved Kill Team 2018, there's all kinds of sort of precursor things in it that remind me of the Kill Team 2018 book. Many of these reminders are very visual stuff, like stuff in the book layout and things like that, charts and such, art assets being reused between the two books, etc. But also, they refer to all the groups that you build to play in this game as kill teams all throughout the book. So that might also give me some degree of warm and fuzzy as well. But there's differences too. Like this game can be played on a game board anywhere between 2 foot by 2 foot to 4 foot by 4 foot, whereas, Kill Team is 22 by 30. Then there's, of course, the old school plastic templates and the scatter dice and all that kind of stuff, pinning rules, ammo rolls to see if your gun jams and all that kind of stuff, and a bunch of other older kind of game mechanics that I still kind of find interesting. So last year, I decided I wanted to get back into it. I wanted to play Shadow War Armageddon again. I hopped on eBay and looked for some extra books. I knew I had the one that came with the box, and it only had the 3 forces in it, but I also kind of wanted the standalone copy of the book as well. And I couldn't remember if I had one, so I went searching on eBay. Again, the standalone copy is thicker. It's 200 pages here, right, in comparison to 120 pages there. Also, like I said again, it has the aforementioned kind of line here on the front cover, and on the back it has a UPC symbol since it was sold separately. And also the back has pictures of actual models, whereas the original version just has a wraparound of the front cover. I had terrain sorted, of course, because I've been doing this for some time, so I have plenty of terrain stuff to use, but I also wanted to add some kind of cool Necromunda tiles to the mix, especially for the 2 by 2 foot board layouts. I started working on building some Necromunda tiles, and they're built and they're primed, but now it's time to actually start painting and things like that, and I'm kind of having some analysis paralysis issues. The great thing about those tiles, though, is that they're also super useful for other games as well. Now, while I'm working on that, I'll also be working on seeing what models I have already finished that can be dropped into some of the kill teams that I want to start playing with. The kill teams that call out to me most are probably Inquisition, because they're really customizable, right? And I already have a whole bunch of cool models to use for them. And then Necrons, because I probably already have everything that I need for that force, like already painted and everything. But if I don't, they paint up really super fast because, they're Necrons. And then Skitarii, because again, I probably have everything ready. And then Grey Knights, because I think I have a box of them somewhere. And I've never done Grey Knights before, never built them, never painted them, so that's going to be something I think kind of fun. And then there's a few others too, probably Chaos Space Marines, because I've got plenty of Chaos Space Marines already, and Imperial Guard, because again, I've already got the Guard. But we'll see. One of the things that I love in Shadow War Armageddon is the customization. Pretty much every model can get different weapons and armor and equipment to make each of them very unique. Trench Crusade is probably the closest current game that I can think of that has this same kind of vibe to it. When I first started reading the rules for Trench Crusade and saw all the different weapon lists and equipment lists and armor lists and all that kind of stuff, I got a very sort of nostalgic feeling that did remind me of Shadow War Armageddon and, kind of list building of the old days. Customization of your forces is something that Games Workshop seems to be kind of really getting away from these days. Maybe it's due to balance concerns and issues that way, or maybe it's just to kind of save on design time. I'm not sure which, I don't know. But I really miss being able to outfit each of my fighters with kind of special equipment and weapons if I have the points to spend. That's one of the things that I miss from the newer versions of Kill Team, frankly, and it's something that I love in games like Trench Crusade, as I mentioned, but also Space Weirdos, and also here in Shadow War Armageddon. Customizing what your models carry helps to make them yours. However, this game doesn't have a solo mode like more modern games do these days, so I need other people to play with me. One of the reasons I'm buying multiple copies of the rulebook is for that very reason. I'm going to have to teach people to play, and I'm going to have to provide all the stuff to play as well. A copy of the rules book to kind of look through. I'll also be bringing the models, and of course then, the lists are going to be pre-made, and then terrain and dice and pretty much everything else. It'll be almost like a really big fancy board game, where you take it, open it up, and bring all the parts and teach somebody to play. Now maybe I can fit everything that I need in one of those big plastic tubs, so I can just bring that and then have everything that's needed for 2 people to learn how to play. Will I single-handedly be able to resurrect Shadow War Armageddon to bring it back from the dead and to levels of popularity that rival Mordheim? No, I don't think I will be able to. No, it'd be cool, right? Because it's a really great game, but that's not really the point. The point is to enjoy sharing tabletop wargaming with other people and to maybe broaden their horizons a little bit. If your friends that you play with, whatever, don't seem to ever want to try out any indie games that you keep bringing to the table, they only want to play GW stuff, then maybe look at games like Shadow War Armageddon or maybe even Mordheim to see if you can get them interested. Trying to resurrect Shadow War Armageddon, even a little bit, is kind of low-hanging fruit for me personally. I played it and I enjoyed it in the past. I already have terrain for it. I already have models for it. I just have to figure out what I've done with the templates and the scatter dice. I'm not exactly sure where they are, but I know they're in the basement somewhere. I'll find them. But trying to teach it to others gives me another game in my kind of gaming advocate arsenal for teaching folks. If I can tailor which game to bring to the person that I'm trying to get into it, then I'm even more likely to succeed and maybe even get them to play a second game and become even more interested, and who knows where it'll go from there. Which allegedly dead tabletop game do you think you'd like to try to bring back? Would you want to, bring it out to other people and maybe teach them, or just perhaps play it amongst your current play group? Or have you already succeeded with bringing a game back from the dead, if even just a little bit? Let us all know down in the comments below. If you like videos like this and would like to see more about Shadow War Armageddon here on the channel, then please engage in depressmentation of the like button to let me and YouTube know that you like it. It's down there towards the bottom of the thing, below the image and whatnot. Also, while you're down there, if you want to see more videos like this every single Friday, you can hit the subscribe button. It's free. Thanks for watching.